The night camp in the dark forest. In the summer of 2022, a group of 6 close friends, Martin, Laura, Nick, Jane, Sam, and Emily, decided to spend a weekend of adventure and fun in the heart of a remote and dark forest. The forest they chose for camping was located near the Appalachian Mountains and was popular for summer retreats due to its dense trees and winding trails. This forest was well known among locals for its indigenous festivals and mysterious tales. On the first day, the group eagerly set up their camp and went exploring around the forest. They brought food, camping gear, and digital cameras to capture their enjoyable moments. During the day, they traversed forest trails and reached spots with stunning and amazing natural views. As night fell, the group gathered around the campfire, engaging in conversation and storytelling. The flickering flames of the fire created a warm and friendly atmosphere amid the forest's darkness. Everything seemed perfect until the sky gradually darkened and night set in. Around 11 p.m., an unusual sound came from the distance. The sound of rustling leaves and footsteps moving slowly on the ground. At first, the group thought the sounds might be due to forest animals, but gradually they felt the sounds were unnatural and human-like. The sounds were intermittent and unpredictable, which increased anxiety among the group members. Laura, who was both curious and terrified, suggested they investigate the source of the sound with a flashlight. Despite their concerns, the group collectively decided to search for the noise. They navigated through narrow and winding forest paths, gradually reaching an area that seemed uninhabited. The trees were incredibly dense, and the darkness of the forest was overwhelming, leading them to a secluded spot. In this area, they discovered a small, abandoned tent among the trees. The tent was extremely old and dirty, and it appeared to have been abandoned for some time. Peering inside the tent, they found it filled with strange and terrifying signs. Bloody objects, dirty handprints, and even several figures that seemed inexplicably present inside the tent. Inside the tent, there were signs of violence and pain that clearly indicated a horrific event had occurred. There were writings in various languages, strange drawings, and even pieces of torn, bloody clothing scattered around. One of the group members, Nick, was terrified by these scenes and quickly returned to the camp. The other members also hurried back to the tent and decided to return to their camp immediately. Back at the camp, the group tried to calm themselves for the night, but from that night onwards, they were continuously disturbed by terrifying and ambiguous sounds. There were cries, wails, and even incomprehensible conversations coming from the forest. Every night, the group had to sit around the fire to calm their nerves and avoided discussing their past nights. On one night, Sam, one of the group members, woke up and noticed a dark shadow moving near the tent. The shadow was approaching him, and as it gradually got closer to the tent, Sam was extremely frightened and began calling out to the other members. However, when they woke up and went outside, they found no trace of the shadow or anything unusual. In the following nights, the psychological pressure on the group increased, and each member began experiencing hallucinations and terrifying dreams separately. Every night, one of them would have nightmares where spirits with angry, distorted faces chased them. These nightmares were so real and frightening that the group members grew closer each day, trying to comfort one another. Around 4 a.m. on one of the nights, Nick, who was in severe terror, decided to flee the camp. He suddenly went outside the tent and got lost in the darkness of the forest. The group immediately began searching for him, but ultimately, all they found were scattered belongings and bloody traces. Nick was never found, and it seemed that he had mysteriously disappeared. Extensive searches conducted by rescue teams and police yielded no results, and Nick was completely gone. After several days, the group decided to leave the camp and quickly return to their homes. Each member separately suffered from psychological issues and continuous nightmares. Each member experienced sleep disorders, severe anxiety, and horrifying hallucinations. The group never managed to explain what happened to Nick and why these terrifying experiences occurred that night. The forest became known as a cursed and frightening place, and no one dared to approach it. After returning home, the members of the group tried to return to their normal lives, but the effects of their terrifying experiences remained. Each of them faced fears and nightmares that seemed to transform their experience into an eternal nightmare. The group eventually drifted apart, and each tried to forget those terrifying nights in their own way. Over time, the story became a local legend, and locals began warning each other. It is said that wandering spirits and malevolent forces still inhabit the heart of the forest, seeking new victims. This experience became a haunting reminder of terrifying nights and deep fears that they could never fully escape. The dark, desolate forest remains known as a cursed and terrifying place, and no one dares to approach it, even for a single night. Shadows among the trees. In the final week of summer, a group of 5 friends, Luke, Mia, Steve, Claire, and Jack, decided to spend their weekend in a remote, lesser-known area of the Swiss Alps. The location was renowned for its breathtaking natural beauty and seclusion, making it an ideal spot for camping. They set up their campsite near a small, secluded lake surrounded by a dense, dark forest. The first day was spent swimming in the lake and exploring the surrounding woods. The towering trees cast deep, enigmatic shadows, and as dusk fell, the forest seemed to transform into a realm of eerie mystery. By nightfall, the group sat around a crackling campfire, sharing stories and enjoying each other's company. The atmosphere was initially lively, but as the evening wore on, a heavy and unsettling silence began to envelop the camp. As the night deepened, Steve noticed an unusual chill in the air and saw the trees moving in an odd manner. He mentioned it to the others, but they brushed it off, attributing it to the cold wind and the encroaching darkness. Around 1 a.m., Luke and Jack decided to investigate a strange noise they had heard coming from the forest. The sound was a mix of faint moans and occasional indistinct cries. They ventured into the forest with their flashlights, and as they moved deeper, the sounds grew clearer and more disturbing. Eventually, they stumbled upon a small, decrepit building, hidden deep within the forest. The structure was overgrown with moss and vines, and it seemed abandoned for many years. As they approached, they noticed an eerie, flickering light coming from an entrance that appeared strangely illuminated despite the surrounding darkness. Cautiously, they entered the building and found it surprisingly clean and well-maintained inside. The space was filled with old furniture, dusty books, and personal items that seemed untouched for decades. In one of the rooms, they discovered a large, antique mirror hanging on the wall. As Luke and Jack studied the mirror, it suddenly began to change. The reflection within the glass shifted, revealing dark, indistinct shadows moving around. Gradually, these shadows took on the shape of semi-transparent figures, some of which appeared to be in torment. One of these figures resembled a young woman with terrified, wide eyes, silently pleading for help. Jack, overwhelmed by fear, quickly retreated from the building, but Luke remained fixated on the mirror. As soon as Jack emerged, he noticed that the forest around them had transformed. The trees seemed to shift unnaturally, and the once familiar surroundings now appeared foreign and menacing. Panicked, he rushed back to the camp to warn his friends. Meanwhile, Mia and Claire, concerned for Steve, who had been unusually quiet and withdrawn, decided to search for him. They entered the building and found the mirror displaying increasingly disturbing scenes of anguish and despair. As they searched for Steve, they stumbled upon him in a room with a dirt-covered floor and open cabinets filled with old, discarded items. Steve appeared dazed and confused, his face pale and his eyes wide with fright. The group, now more terrified than ever, decided to leave the building and head back to the campsite. However, as they made their way through the forest, they were haunted by eerie, disembodied voices and shadowy figures flitting between the trees. The unsettling sounds and the oppressive darkness made every step feel like a journey through a living nightmare. As they reached the edge of the forest, the shadows seemed to close in on them. The forest, once a place of natural beauty, had become a labyrinth of terror, with every sound and movement heightening their fear. The group hurriedly made their way back to their car, their hearts racing with the fear of being pursued. Upon returning to town, each member of the group experienced relentless nightmares and terrifying encounters. The abandoned building and its mysterious mirror became local legends, with townsfolk warning others to avoid the area. It is said that on certain nights, the moans and shadows of tormented souls can still be heard from within the forest, and those who venture too close may find themselves trapped in a nightmarish reality. The story of the friends' harrowing experience remains one of the most chilling and mysterious tales of the region, serving as a haunting reminder of the dark secrets hidden in the heart of the forest. The Stranger in the Dark. On a cold, rainy night in late autumn, a group of 3 friends named Ellie, Jack, and Maya decided to go camping in a remote and lesser-known area in the Alaskan mountains. This area, unofficially known as the Shadow Mountains, was renowned for its winding trails and mysterious caves. After a long day of travel and traversing challenging terrain, the group arrived at a spot by a small lake that seemed perfect for camping. The lake was nestled among dense trees and large boulders, creating a serene and isolated setting. They set up their tents by the lake and spent the day enjoying the natural beauty of the area. As night fell, the rain intensified, and the sound of raindrops hitting the tent roofs became a soothing melody. The group sat around the campfire, enjoying its warmth and telling stories. However, Ellie suddenly noticed something unusual. Ellie mentioned seeing a faint, moving light at the edge of the lake. Jack and Maya initially thought it might be the reflection of the campfire light or a natural object, but when Ellie insisted, they decided to investigate. The rain continued to pour heavily, and thick fog rose from the surface of the lake, making visibility difficult. The group cautiously approached the moving light. When they reached the lake, they discovered that the light was coming from an old, rusty lantern placed unusually beside a large ancient tree. The lantern was clearly decades old, covered in dust and grime. Next to the lantern, there was an old bundle of papers and a small wooden box. Maya, curious, decided to examine the box. When she opened it, she found it filled with old photographs, some with familiar faces and some with unknown ones. Among the photos was a faded map of the area covered with strange symbols. The writings on the map were in an indecipherable language, appearing cryptic and enigmatic. At this point, Jack, increasingly anxious, told the group they should return to the camp. But before they could decide, a strange sound from the forest reached their ears, something scraping on the ground and indistinct moans. The noises seemed to be coming from deep within the forest and were getting closer continuously. The group hurried back to the camp, only to find their tents in disarray and their belongings scattered. Fear and anxiety surged. Meanwhile, they heard footsteps around the camp, which seemed unnervingly close and irregular. After a frantic and futile search for the source of the noises, the group decided to leave the camp immediately. On their way back, they encountered bizarre changes in their surroundings. The trees appeared unnaturally twisted, and eerie shadows stretched across the ground. Continuously, a dim light seemed to be watching them from a distance, and the sound of footsteps could still be heard, drawing nearer. When the group approached the road, they found their vehicle had broken down, and its battery had inexplicably drained. While trying to fix the issue, one member of the group suddenly disappeared, leaving behind only a mysterious, unexplained footprint next to the car. As they left in terror and desperation, each member of the group experienced strange and frightening encounters. Reports of seeing moving shadows and hearing unexplainable noises that seemed to close in on them emerged after their journey. Over time, this experience became a local legend, and residents warned each other to avoid the Shadow Mountains. It is said that on certain nights, old lanterns and mysterious sounds appear in the forest, and there are signs of unknown and terrifying entities in the area. This story remains one of the chilling and mysterious tales associated with the region. The image in the mirror. On a dark and stormy night in late autumn, a group of 4 friends, Tina, Sam, Emily, and Jordan, decided to spend the weekend in an old, isolated cabin on the outskirts of town. The cabin was nestled deep within a dense forest and was informally known as the Cursed Cabin. Over the years, it had become infamous for eerie tales and rumors of supernatural activity and ghosts. When the group arrived at the cabin, heavy rain was falling, and fierce winds were shaking the trees. They quickly unloaded their gear from the car and headed inside. To their surprise, the cabin was clean and neatly arranged, despite having been vacant for years. The walls were covered with old wallpaper adorned with vague, unsettling paintings, and in one corner of the living room, there was an old, large mirror hanging on the wall. On the first night, the group decided to gather around the fire and share scary stories. As they sat around the fire, enjoying its warmth, the conversation gradually became quieter, and attention shifted to the large mirror in the corner. Tina, who had been unconsciously staring at the mirror, noticed that the image within it was subtly shifting. Initially, she thought the changes might be due to the flickering firelight, but gradually, she saw shadows moving within the mirror, and shapes resembling people in distress were appearing. Tina mentioned this to the others, who initially dismissed it as a trick of the light. However, Sam and Jordan decided to investigate further. They approached the mirror with their flashlights and began to examine the image more closely. The reflection in the mirror was unusually dark and blurred, with continuous, unsettling changes. It appeared that the mirror was displaying scenes of torment and horror. Sam leaned in closer to the mirror and suddenly noticed a disturbing image. A young woman trying desperately to escape from within the mirror. Her face was filled with terror, and though she was silent, her eyes screamed for help. Sam recoiled in horror and told the group that something very frightening and unnatural was happening with the mirror. Tina and Emily also looked into the mirror and saw the disturbing changes. The images within the mirror fluctuated between light and darkness in a bizarre manner, showing scenes of pain and suffering. Specifically, figures resembling people seemed to be moving in agony and screaming in a horrifyingly distorted fashion. As the night progressed, and with the hour approaching midnight, the group decided to cover the mirror with a dark cloth and try to get some sleep. However, before they could settle down, they began to hear strange, agonized cries and moans coming from various rooms within the cabin. The sounds grew louder and seemed to be coming from within the cabin itself. The group, now gripped with fear and anxiety, decided to search the cabin. With their flashlights, they explored the rooms and discovered that the cabin was in disarray. In each room, there were signs of bizarre and unsettling activity. In one room, they found an old wardrobe containing several small, dark photographs of different people. These images depicted faces in distress, crying and looking mournfully at the camera. While they were frantically searching for the source of the sounds and the strange occurrences, Emily suddenly disappeared without a trace. A small note was left behind where she had last been seen. The note contained a chilling and cryptic message. "They are waiting in the mirror." Panic and terror escalated as the group decided to leave the cabin immediately. As they rushed towards the exit, shadows from within the mirror seemed to close in on them, and the cries of agony grew louder. They finally managed to reach their car and fled the cabin in terror. Upon returning to town, each member of the group experienced persistent nightmares and terrifying encounters. The cabin and its old mirror became local legends, with townsfolk warning others to stay away from it. It is said that the mirror continuously displays images of suffering and pain, and only those who dare to enter under rare and specific conditions encounter the horrific experiences associated with it.